Smart people know that not every invitation to conflict requires an RSVP. Toxic people often thrive in emotionally chaotic environments. They stir the pot, provoke reactions, manipulate conversations, and twist facts to create confusion. Their power doesn't come from being right. It comes from keeping others off balance. But smart people, they don't play that game. You see, emotional chaos is a trap. It's a space where logic gets drowned out by drama. Arguments become circular. Accusations replace facts, and nothing ever really gets resolved. The goal isn't resolution, it's control. Toxic individuals use emotional chaos like a weapon. One moment they're passive aggressive, the next they're playing the victim. They gaslight, guilt trip, and shift blame. The more you try to explain yourself, the deeper you sink. It becomes a cycle of defending your intentions against someone who never had good ones in the first place. Smart people recognize the pattern early. They don't take the bait. Instead of getting pulled into a shouting match, they stay calm. They listen, but they don't absorb. They process, but they don't personalize. This doesn't mean they suppress their emotions. It means they master them. Emotional discipline becomes their armor. They respond instead of reacting. When a toxic person throws out a provocative comment, the smart person pauses. That pause is powerful. In that small space between trigger and response, they decide who they want to be. Not every insult requires a comeback. Not every slight deserves attention. Smart people understand the cost of engagement, and they choose wisely. In moments of emotional chaos, toxic people look for fuel. They want your voice raised, your tone shifted, your words stumbling. That's how they know they've got you. But when you remain centered, when your energy doesn't match their volatility, it disarms them. They may try harder at first, get louder, more unreasonable, but smart people don't flinch. They realize that nothing frustrates someone who feeds on drama more than someone who refuses to participate in it. This doesn't mean smart people are pushovers or emotionally detached robots. They feel deeply even, but they've learned how to feel without flaring. They've learned that calm isn't weakness, it's strategy. Chaos can't grow in stillness, and toxic people can't manipulate what they can't disturb. Whether it's a personal relationship, a workplace conflict, or a random encounter, emotionally intelligent individuals know when to step back, when to stay quiet, and when to walk away. They don't invest energy in proving their worth to someone who is committed to misunderstanding them. They keep their peace not because they're indifferent, but because they've learned that peace is more valuable than being right. The truth is, emotional chaos only consumes what feeds it, and smart people, they keep their hands off the fire. Smart people don't waste their time trying to control others. They understand that the only person they can truly manage is themselves. And in dealing with toxic people, that self-control shows up through boundaries, not ultimatums. There's a big difference between the two, and smart people know exactly where that line is. A boundary is a statement of what you will and will not allow in your life. It's firm, but most importantly, it's focused on your own behavior, not someone else's. An ultimatum, on the other hand, is about trying to force someone to change by threatening consequences. It's rooted in control, not clarity. And toxic people, they'll always test ultimatums. They'll push, they'll provoke, they'll call your bluff because they know most people don't follow through. That's why smart people don't issue ultimatums. They don't try to force toxic people into being better. They simply draw a line and stick to it. Boundaries sound like, I don't engage in conversations where I'm being yelled at. They don't sound like, if you yell at me one more time, I'm leaving you. That first one is a boundary. It tells the other person what you accept and what you don't. The second is an ultimatum. It gives away your power and turns the focus onto the other person's choices. Smart people aren't interested in that kind of emotional gamble. They don't hand over the keys to their peace. Toxic people love gray areas. They thrive where things are vague and uncertain. That's where they twist words, bend rules, and find loopholes to keep doing what they do. But boundaries remove the gray. They create structure. They remove confusion. Smart people don't scream their boundaries. They don't over-explain them. They state them calmly and consistently. And when the line gets crossed, they act quietly, decisively. It's important to understand that boundaries aren't about punishment. They're about protection. Smart people don't set boundaries because they want to change the other person. They set them to protect their own energy, time, and emotional well-being. They're not trying to fix toxic people. They're just choosing not to get entangled with them. A boundary might look like limiting access, deciding not to answer late, night phone calls that always lead to drama. It might be emotional distance, not sharing vulnerable information with someone who uses it as ammunition later. It might even be physical space, declining invitations or avoiding one-on-one time with someone who consistently crosses the line. And when the toxic person pushes back, because smart people stay steady. They don't argue about the boundary. They don't beg to be respected. They don't explain over and over again. They let actions speak. They reinforce the line with consistency, not volume. It's not about making someone understand. It's about making a decision to honor your own limits. Even when someone else doesn't, silence is misunderstood. Many think it means weakness, passivity, or avoidance. But smart people know better. They understand that silence, when used with purpose, is one of the most powerful tools in dealing with toxic individuals. It's not just the absence of words, it's the presence of control. It's the refusal to feed a fire that's been lit to consume them. Toxic people rely on noise. They stir up arguments, provoke reactions, and create emotional messes, not to solve problems, but to maintain control. They speak over others, twist words, and interrupt to dominate conversations. They want to keep you talking, explaining, defending, justifying, because the more you speak, the more material they have to manipulate. But when you go silent, you strip them of that power. Smart people don't engage in verbal warfare with someone who isn't interested in resolution. They recognize the moment when continuing the conversation does more damage than walking away from it. Silence becomes their line in the sand. It says, I'm not here to be twisted, baited, or emotionally drained. It communicates boundaries without the need for confrontation. Silence is not about giving the cold shoulder. It's about giving yourself space. Smart people understand the energy it takes to stay composed in a toxic environment, and they protect that energy through silence. They pause instead of pounce. They reflect instead of react. That moment of quiet isn't retreat. It's strategy. It's an intentional act of self-respect. There's also power in refusing to explain what doesn't need to be explained. Toxic people love to demand answers to keep you on the defense. But smart people don't waste breath on people who aren't listening to understand. They let silence carry the weight of finality. It says more than any comeback ever could. It shifts the control of the conversation. Suddenly, the toxic person is left without fuel, speaking into a space that no longer responds. And silence isn't just verbal. Sometimes it's in the delayed response to a text. Sometimes it's in walking away mid-confrontation. Sometimes it's in choosing not to show up where drama always follows. These non-verbal cues speak volumes. Smart people don't announce their peace. They practice it, and the stillness they maintain becomes unsettling to those who rely on chaos to connect. In silence, smart people also find clarity. Without the noise of conflict clouding their judgment, they're able to assess what's really happening. They're not distracted by the performance of the toxic person. They see the pattern, not just the moment. That clarity helps them make decisions from a place of logic, not emotional impulse. Toxic individuals often interpret silence as defeat, but that's because they can't recognize discipline. Smart people don't use silence to hurt. They use it to heal, to recalibrate, to decide what's worth responding to and what isn't. Smart people understand something that many overlook. Not every conflict is worth your energy, and not every challenge is an attack on your ego. When dealing with toxic individuals, they make a conscious decision. They choose to protect their energy instead of defending their pride. It's not that they don't the sting of disrespect or the urge to respond. They simply value peace over proving a point. Ego is loud. It wants the last word. It wants to win the argument. It wants recognition, validation, and applause, even when those things come from people who add no real value to your life. Toxic people know this. They know how to poke at your pride, how to push your buttons, how to draw you into unnecessary battles. But when you're smart, you learn that every time you take that bait, you're spending emotional energy on someone who benefits from your exhaustion. Focusing on energy means asking, is this worth it? It's about filtering your responses through a higher lens. Smart people know that their time and mental space are limited, and they protect those assets like gold. Instead of reacting to every insult, they conserve their energy for what actually matters: growth, purpose, peace, and progress. Ego gets caught up in appearances. It wants others to see that you're not someone to mess with. It pushes you to clap back, to prove you're right, to make someone else feel small just so you can feel big. But smart people know that real strength doesn't come from dominance. It comes from discipline. They let go of the need to be right in order to stay aligned with what's right for them. This isn't about being passive. It's about being strategic. When a toxic person tries to bait them into conflict, smart people measure the cost. They know that some fights may give temporary satisfaction, but leave a lasting drain. So instead of feeding the ego, they feed their focus. Instead of arguing to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding them, they shift their attention to things that build rather than break. Smart people also know that ego feeds off external validation while energy thrives from within. Toxic people often withhold approval, dangle praise, or manipulate praise as a tool of control. But those who are rooted in self-awareness don't fall for it. They don't depend on someone else's applause to feel valuable. They generate their own validation through clarity and self-respect. Protecting energy means staying centered. It means walking away when staying would only drain you. It means responding with intention, not impulse. It means letting silence speak when words would only escalate. Smart people know that when you chase ego, you lose energy. And when you protect energy, ego starts to shrink. In power, smart people understand that detachment isn't coldness. It's clarity. It's the ability to step back, see things as they are, and make decisions based on truth instead of emotion. In a world where toxicity often disguises itself as loyalty, passion, or just being real, detachment becomes a necessary strength. It allows smart people to protect their peace without feeling guilty for doing so. Detachment doesn't mean you stop carrying. It means you stop carrying. You stop carrying the emotional weight of people who refuse to take responsibility for their own actions. You stop internalizing every insult, every manipulation, every guilt trip. You stop trying to fix people who benefit from staying broken. As smart people learn to detach, not because they lack compassion, but because they finally realize that compassion without boundaries leads to self-betrayal. Toxic individuals often exploit emotional connection. They weaponize closeness. They create cycles of conflict and reconciliation, drama and peace, HOs and calm, all to keep control. They want you emotionally entangled, reactive, and dependent. Detachment disrupts that cycle. It removes the toxic person's ability to pull strings. When you're no longer emotionally invested in their approval or attention, their power over you dissolves. Smart people know how to observe without absorbing. Detachment gives them that ability. They see the behavior, the manipulation, the patterns, but they don't take it personally. They don't try to decode every mixed message or justify every hurtful action. They let people be who they are, and they decide with a clear mind whether that aligns with their values and boundaries. This emotional distance gives them leverage. It allows them to make decisions based on what's healthy, not what's familiar. Detachment gives them the strength to walk away without needing closure from someone who was never honest in the first place. It allows them to be present without being pulled into someone else's emotional storm. Smart people also understand that detachment is a form of self-respect. It's saying, I can love you and still leave the room. I can wish you well and still move on. I can care, but I won't carry this anymore. They don't wait for someone to change in order to feel peace. They create that peace by stepping back. They no longer seek validation from people who invalidate them. Detachment also sharpens perspective. When you're too close to dysfunction, it starts to look normal. But when you pull back, the picture becomes clearer. You see how much you've tolerated. You see the manipulation for what it is. You see how much of your energy was spent trying to hold something together that was never meant to be whole. Smart people don't confuse detachment with bitterness. They don't need to cut someone off with hate in their heart. They detach with calm, with clarity, with conviction, not to hurt the other person, but to finally stop hurting themselves. Smart people know that growth often requires letting go of people, patterns, and past versions of themselves. And sometimes that process brings guilt, especially when toxic people are involved. Guilt is one of the most powerful emotional weapons used by manipulative individuals. They'll make you feel selfish for choosing yourself, disloyal for setting boundaries, or heartless for walking away. But smart people don't let that guilt override their need to grow. Toxic people rely on guilt to keep you small. They'll say things like, after everything I've done for you, or you've changed, or you used to be different. They frame your growth as betrayal because your evolution threatens their control. The moment you start to rise, the pressure to shrink will show up, not always in anger, but in guilt tripping, emotional manipulation, and subtle reminders of the hold you they preferred. But smart people learn to recognize that guilt and growth often arrive at the same time, and they choose the path that elevates rather than the one that pacifies. Choosing growth means accepting that not everyone can come with you. It means outgrowing relationships that are built on your silence, your compliance, or your lower self. And when you start setting standards, some people will call you difficult. When you start honoring your time, some will call you distant. When you stop saying eyes to keep the peace, some will call you selfish. That's when guilt tries to creep in. But smart people don't trade their future for someone else's comfort. They understand that guilt isn't always a signal of doing something wrong. Sometimes it's just a sign that you're breaking an old pattern. Especially if you were conditioned to prioritize others over yourself. Especially if you were taught that love meant sacrifice without limits. Smart people pause and ask, is this guilt coming from my values or from my conditioning? That awareness allows them to feel the guilt but not be guided by it. Growth requires hard choices. It asks you to be honest about what's draining you, what's limiting you, and who's not growing with you. And guilt can whisper that you owe people more time, more chances, more patience. But smart people know they don't owe anyone their peace. They've learned that you can forgive someone and still walk away. You can be compassionate without staying in a cycle that stunts your development. You can care about someone's pain without choosing to carry it on your back. Smart people also redefine what guilt means. To them, guilt isn't a stop sign. It's a checkpoint, a moment to reflect, not retreat. A sign that you're entering new territory where the old rules no longer apply. And in those moments, they choose growth, not because it's easy, but because staying the same, staying small, silent, resentful costs far more than guilt ever will.